All right, I am Chris Wells from Blue Fire Studios. I'm one of the effects artists on Mythica. So I'm going to go over how to do an army and how to attack a castle. So this is the first plate. This is the plate that we got, and it's just some beautiful footage flying over mountains, pulling back over mountains. It's actually played in reverse. So the first thing we need to do is go in and get what the camera is actually doing. That's called match moving or tracking the shot, which is what we're doing here. So to track and match move a shot, you essentially track a whole bunch of 3D points. And once you've got all these points, how they move relative to each other, it's called parallax, determines where the camera is moving in 3D space. Now, when you're building an army, it's a little tricky to animate, in this shot, 2,500 people, right? So that makes it a little hard to go through and animate each person. So what we actually did is we did motion capture. You can see these guys that are all on top of each other here, and we actually only had 5 people. We did a motion capture cycle of a guy running at a different speed, and 5 different variations on the speed of someone running. And then we take those 5 people, and we essentially offset it and slide it around so it feels like more and more different people. So when you see this, when you go back out, now suddenly we have 2,500 people marching down this hill. Now the other thing that's interesting, when you get crowds of people moving together, they interact and move together in a very unique way. It's not all just lined up going down the hill. What it is they kind of bump into each other and kind of follow each other, and that's what's known as essentially flocking. So it may look like just a whole bunch of boxes rolling down a hill as we play back it, but you can see they have different speeds. Some of them are clumping together, some of them are bouncing. There's actually catapults here. If we go to another view, see how they're walking around these spots? There's actually catapults there that I'm directing them, and I'm saying, don't run into this, go around it. And so it's this big flocking simulation of people pushing off each other and guiding each other and matching each other's speeds, and then going around things and going down this hill. And that's what makes it feel very organic. One of the other interesting things in this shot is, as I started laying this stuff in, the footage wasn't actually that great. It was kind of mushy and blurry up here. And so when I started doing the shot, I actually ended up replacing all of that. So when you see the final comp, the only thing that's real from the plate is the horizon line of mountains. So here it is. I did 2,500 agents running down this hill. Then I went through and said, each one of you agents, kick up a dust trail. So you can see in here where each one is going through dust, and it feels very much like this organic army that many people, it's going to kick up a lot of dust while running down this hill. So there's other parts that are interesting to the shot. So as I told you, this is all completely digital. The only part that's the actual plate is this section right here. So I went in, have these guys, and you can see the catapults. That was one of the things we really wanted was, they're taking over the city, they're attacking it, they're throwing everything at it. So we modeled up this, textured it up, and then started just launching things. But anytime you do something in CG, you have to make it. So I was doing this, and I got one of my renders back, and one of the elements was slightly lower than anticipated and went right through the corner of this gate here. And I looked at it for a while and thought, oh, okay, I got to re-render that, move it up a bit. But I really like the idea of just blowing apart the side of that thing. So I spent couple more days and went in and modeled some of that geometry on the side, put it in, and you can't really tell that much, but there's actually layers of bricks and chunks of rock and stuff, so that when it breaks up, it's just this huge amount of debris, because there's actually bricks in there that got knocked apart. So I went in and put some more time into that, so it knocks apart and trails of dust and stuff, and then the big chunks bouncing off the wall, and that really helped sell it as far as they're in danger, right? Their village is being burned. Big thing blows it apart. Like, these guys are coming to destroy these fellas. So to summarize, to build a shot like this, you need a good plate, something that you can put everything into. you need to get the 3D camera position of that plate. Then you need to build in all these different elements. So you have a foundation of here's what the ground looks like, populate it with grass and rocks. Here's what the village looks like. Here's what the castle looks like. And then you need to start layering on the motions of the characters. So the motion capture, and then you need to define and express mathematically how these things will flock and how they'll interact together. And then simulate all the fire and all the destruction, build up all the destruction. And in the end, that will give you a very fun, exciting shot.
I'm Rob Field. I'm a compositor here at Bluefire, and I was tasked with getting the some of the 3D environments and just virtual environments for Mythica put together. So I just want to talk quickly about how we handled that. Obviously, the film had a tight deadline, and so we had to come up with ways of trying to make the environments look good, but also be able to be put together very quickly. So we knew that we had to make this location. It's the Necromancer's tomb. So here it is in Maya. As you can see, it's a fairly extensive set that should provide something interesting for us to look at no matter where the camera happens to be facing. These little pixelated things are the statues that you'll see in a moment. And those are proxies in order to save on memory. This is why you can't see the detail there. So we set up the environment in Maya, then we textured it. And then for each shot, we would go in and track the shot so that we can identify how the camera is moving and have our 3D camera, if necessary, move in the exact same way. So this is the introductory shot for the Necromancer's tomb environment. As you can see, the camera is on a crane, and it kind of lifts up as it tilts down. They ended up deciding they didn't really want that move, and so we ended up having to do a 3D move on top of this. But we had to start off by tracking this move, and as you can see, there's the track. The computer can figure out the location of the camera by following all these various little points in the scene, and then triangulating from those back to the location of the original camera. So for this shot with the full 3D move, we redid the camera move based on what we had captured. So from here on down, this whole segment here is an entirely new move. And then from here, if it transitions into the real camera's motion. That allowed us to give the director exactly what they wanted. And out of Maya for this shot, because we knew we would be having to make changes quickly and iteratively, to get the director what they wanted, we rendered out just a whole variety of different render passes. These are just, instead of just rendering a final image that looks like a photograph, we went through and we rendered out kind of all the component parts of the image so that we can reassemble that image inside of the compositing software and have way more control over the final shot without having to go back to the render. So all of that gets combined together with the original footage, which of course comes in here. As you can see, we only had a green screen for a portion of the shot, so we had to spill suppress it and do some roto work and also some keying work to get down to just the elements of the shot that need to be in the final shot, which, as you can see here, is basically just the guys and the area immediately around them. Then we start adding in all the various information that we rendered out in order to combine it all into a finished shot, which is what we see over here. This is adding in all of the various components that we rendered and coloring them as necessary, adding in some 3D smoke, and various passes like that. And even with some of the information that we had, for example, going in and adding texture information like this, concrete pattern onto the statues themselves to add a little more detail into the statues. So that's how we approach some of the very large number of environment and 3D location shots on Mythica 2.
Hi, so I'm Matt Hoffman. I'm here at Blue Fire Studios, and we're doing dragons. We do a lot of dragons and a lot of creatures and that kind of thing. And Mythica is full of dragons and other creatures. So I'm going to show you just a little bit of kind of how we do this and go into a little bit of detail about kind of some of the things that we do to make things work for shots. So I think everybody's kind of seen in behind the scenes things how creatures are animated and painted and kind of sculpted and that sort of thing. So I'm not really going to go into that, but I'm going to show you kind of what we get here. We have our dragon here, and it's popping up over a sandbank because our heroes are standing there thinking that they're A-okay. They've just managed to miss this dragon, and it comes up and surprises them. So this shot, you can see here he is kind of making his way up and scaring them. And so kind of one of the challenges that we have is we'll take the dragon, the model, and with its textures and everything, and you can kind of see that here. This is what the dragon looks like with the textures painted. This is missing some of the details, the fine details, but this is basically what we kind of start with, is just sort of this painted model, essentially. So one of the kind of challenges of making stuff feel real, and kind of letting you buy a shot is making the dragon interact with light properly, essentially. And that's called shading and lighting. And so a shader is something where I tell the computer, okay, when light hits this dragon, in this area it's shiny, in this area it's bumpy, light bleeds through here in this area, those kinds of things. There's some dirt maybe over here, or just those kinds of little details that kind of help your brain go, oh yeah, I see details in real animals, I could buy that. So that's kind of a lot of what I do, is kind of taking it to that final step to where you light it, you set it in a scene, and then you make sure that it's reacting to light the right way. So once we've done that, we'll render it, we'll light it, we'll put it in the scene and say, hey, the sun's coming from behind him here, and we need to match the highlights and the shadows and everything to the right places from the real shot. So we'll kind of do that, set the light in the right place. And one of the challenges actually is making something feel realistic but also pretty. So sometimes we'll cheat things, we'll have the sun slightly off a little bit or whatever, if it's a little bit prettier, but it feels like it could still work in the scene, because very often the actual scene lighting is kind of boring. So we'll do that and kind of ride that balance between pretty and realistic. We'll render it out, and that's when we take it into our compositing software. So compositing is when you take all the layers and you put them together. And this is a challenge because, again, different cameras see different colors in different ways, react to light in different ways, and so you have to kind of gauge that and say, here's how this is coming across. I need to make this dragon now feel like it's part of this world and that it was shot by this camera. So we'll have this. This is our plate of our heroes being surprised by this terrifying dragon who's just kind of come up to make his presence known. And we'll say, okay, so let's put our dragon in there. So we'll take a couple of steps, but we'll bring in our dragon. So here you can see, now we've got a couple of differences here. If I pause it here, kind of where his wings are kind of spread out, you'll see now we can see like some light bleeding through the wings because they're thin and there's blood in them, and we got some nasty veins going on and that kind of thing. So this is an undead dragon, and those little details tell us this guy is gross and nasty and kind of a bad guy. So you can see kind of some of that stuff starting to come together, and you can see the difference between kind of where we start and where it ends up with a lot of those details. So we'll take that and we'll apply motion blur, which is just what the camera sees when something's quickly moving. You don't see individual perfect little frames. There's quite a bit of blur that goes on, and that helps your eye believe that something was shot by a camera. And then there's a long process of taking the colors and tweaking them to kind of make it feel like it lives in that same scene. If I just plopped him in here without kind of doing that process, it doesn't feel right. The levels are not correct, and it doesn't feel like it marries into that scene. So here's him with kind of the colors adjusted, and he feels kind of like he lives in that same world, essentially. So at this point, we have to say, okay, we need to isolate these characters from the foreground because they need to be in front of the dragon. So this is a process we call rotoscope, which is essentially hand tracing every frame, which is really painful. And you have to do it in a way that works from frame to frame. So you can imagine if you cut out each frame, one frame at a time, and then laid them together in a sequence, you'd probably see some weird buzzing and some stuff. And so you have to do this in an intelligent way that allows them to feel like they're actually cut out. So we'll kind of do that process, and that's sort of what we've got here, is these guys on top of a transparent background. So we can now put the dragon behind them. So we'll grab the dragon, put him in, and that's kind of what we've got going on here. So I've also taken some debris elements, just kind of some dirt charges and some other things. We'll take organic elements often and put them in front of things just to kind of tie things in and help them feel realistic. And these are elements that we've either shot or created, or sometimes we'll use stock elements from other people. And so we put them all together, and what you get is kind of this final shot where it feels like, okay, yeah, that dragon could be coming out of the ground and terrifying these guys. And you can kind of see the debris, popping up because he's coming out of the earth a little bit there, and their kind of surprised moment. So that's kind of some of the things that go into making this kind of stuff come together. There's a lot of weird details and things that people I don't think about sometimes that just have to come together to make it feel like it's all part of the same universe.